building a foundation of strength, a base foundation of strength, and how that relates to jump training, to plyometric training, to properly progressing through a jump training program. That's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm Adrian Honish. I'm the head trainer, director, co-owner of Effectus Athlete Development, and the developer of the Flight School Jump Training Program series. A big gap, again, in jump training has always been the importance of developing strength and understanding why you need to develop that strength in combination with a plyometric program and developing speed and power. And I do this with all of my athletes. Young athletes always jump into plyometrics. They want to jump higher, so well, I've heard of plyometrics. Plyometrics make you jump higher. So they get into a plyometric program, they start jumping, and they'll improve a fair bit. You know, there's been programs years ago in the past that were purely plyometric programs that everybody bought into. I remember when I was in high school, you buy into these plyometric programs, you jump, and you do a couple hundred jumps or 1,000 jumps a week. And right off the start, you get better at jumping, you do, but then you plateau. You can only improve so much before you plateau, and that's as good as you're going to get from that program. You might have a few fluctuations up and down, get a bit better, you get a bit better fatigue, but you stay at that level. And the thing that's missing is that strength work, building that strength base. And so many studies have shown a combination of strength and plyometrics properly periodized together is the optimal way to train jumping. So when you're doing plyometrics, the things you're focusing on are, one, reducing the contact time with the ground, spending as little time on the ground as possible. However, when in contact with the ground, that's your opportunity to produce force. You can't cause yourself to jump higher when you're not in contact with the ground. You need to be in contact, driving through the ground. But you have to spend as little time on the ground as possible. That requires extremely high forces to create high accelerations, to create bigger vertical velocities to get off the ground fast, and to be at the peak vertical velocity at takeoff. The faster your center of gravity is going up at takeoff, the higher you're going to jump like any projectile in the air. But once you're in the air, you've lost control. You can't change anything as far as jump height goes. So what happens in contact with the ground? A couple principles that apply to plyometrics and to jumping higher. One is being able to increase the range of motion that you have available to you to produce force and to increase that vertical acceleration. So basically what I'm saying is, if I'm jumping and I only drop down this low, I get about 45 degrees at the knees and hips, and I jump from there, the only ability I have to produce force is from here, this range of motion, to there. That's how much I have to produce force. But now, if I can get lower, if I can get down to 90 degrees at the knees, 90 degrees at the hips, and from here, I can produce force all through that range. I have a greater amount of time to create a bigger impulse, to create a greater acceleration and vertical velocity. Use that range of motion to produce more vertical velocity at takeoff. But this is where strength comes in. When you get down into those 90 degrees at the knee, 90 degrees at the hip joint angles, your body's at such a mechanical disadvantage. Moment arms are longer. You require more torque to produce, more force to produce the torque because the moment arm's longer. It's so much more difficult to get out of that position fast and create those accelerations unless you're strong. It takes so much strength in the lower body, in the glutes, quads, hamstrings, calves even, to be able to push out of those low positions and take advantage of that full range of motion. So that's where strength development comes into play. You need to be going through a strength program to develop that. And your strength program has to take you into those ranges of motion. If I just take weights and do squats and I only get this low, and those are my squats, well, that's not going to help me once I get down here jumping. I'm still going to be weak down here and strong here. But that's how the body's built anyway. As your joints extend and get into this position, it's easier for them to produce the force that it needs. But you get down low, and it's really difficult to produce force. So you have to train down in those ranges of motion. You have to do squats down to 90 degrees at the knees and hips. You have to get down to that position. You have to do some eccentric training work. Eccentric training is producing force while the muscle is lengthening and stretching. Producing force while the muscle stretches. So an eccentric contraction is loading up with weight, and as I go down, my quads, my glutes, they're all stretching, but they're controlling the movement all the way down. They're controlling it, not allowing me to just drop. So that eccentric force is also important to train before you get into a plyometric program. Reason for that is the next principle I'll talk about in plyometrics, and that's the stretch shortening cycle, the stretch reflex. So in plyometrics, you also want to focus on an extremely fast transition at the bottom. When I drop down into a squat, that deceleration at the bottom to acceleration upward, downward acceleration, upward acceleration, that transition at the bottom needs to be extremely fast to produce the most force possible to get the most out of a vertical jump, to create acceleration again and vertical velocity. So that transition, stretch reflex, your muscle's ability while contracting to stretch and then quickly contract back. And then it utilizes more elastic energy to apply into force production. If you take an elastic band and you stretch it out, hold it for a while, let it go, it'll go a certain distance. Take that same one, stretch it the same distance, boom, and let it go quick stretch and let it go, it'll go further because it uses more of that elastic energy. It doesn't relax in its lengthened position. Muscle the same way. They're not exactly like elastics, but similar concept in that if you stretch and get up fast at the bottom, that quick transition, you'll get higher. But again, you need so much strength to take all that downward momentum of the body, create an impulse big enough to change that momentum to upward momentum and increase acceleration, maximizing vertical velocity of takeoff. That amount of force you have to absorb at the bottom, drive through the ground to create ground reaction forces to drive yourself back up, places a huge demand on the body, especially when the muscles are lengthening, stretched out, and need to contract. So you need to train strength eccentrically. You need to have some slow, controlled movements. Maybe things like a goblet single leg squat where you lower yourself down super slowly and then you just get up with 2 legs. So now you're building that eccentric tolerance in the muscle. That has to happen in a phase. Strength has to develop, pure strength. Progressive overload in your strength training where you continue to increase your weight with proper periodization, rest, and recovery intervals built in there. You continue to progress how much you lift so your body can continue to adapt both physiologically and neurologically as well. As you train and you lift heavier weights, your nervous system also trains. It develops. It learns how to better fire muscle to produce the movement that you're asking it to do. So whether that's the order that it activates muscles or how efficiently it fires and how quickly it fires muscles, your nervous system gets better at producing the movement as well as you physiologically developing muscle and strength. So progressive overload, keep increasing that weight properly with the right progressions. Progression, that's the next thing. How do you progress in strength training? You don't just jump into some barbell squats or power cleans. You need to start with body weight. You need to work your way up to goblet squats, dumbbell squats, go through an eccentric phase, maybe an isometric phase, then get into concentric before you even think of getting into power movements. And after all that, well, now you're ready for plyometrics. But doing this strength work raises the ceiling limit of your potential so that when you do speed and plyometric work, you can be more effective at it, more efficient, and you can get far greater performance results. So without going into more detail than that today, I just wanted to really get that off my chest and talk about the importance of a proper strength program built in with a proper plyometric program with the accurate amount of rest and recovery in there as well to make sure you stay healthy, and periodizing that properly with proper progressions, proper exercise selection, proper coaching and support gets you the best results possible. Okay, that's all I really have to say. The last thing I'll leave you with is all this strength work prevents injury. Prevents injury. When you do max plyometric work, whether it's in training or in your sport, you're going hard at the highest intensities, and the loads placed on your body they're immense. An athlete's body gets beat up with how much it gets put through. The way to prevent injury, do the strength work. Maintain your rest and recovery and your flexibility and your range of motion. Do your foam rolling, do those things. Develop strength. Stay healthy. Keep training hard. Any questions, shoot me a message. I can talk about this stuff all day. I'm here for you. Let me know. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again.